Academica Media. From Academica Media Studios in Miami, Florida, it's Big Ideas in Education, a weekly recap of inspiration and innovation in your schools.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Big Ideas in Education. I am Sarah Boulos from Somerset Academy Schools, joined by Ryan Kairalla of Laurel College. Hi, Ryan.
Hey, Sarah, how's it going?
Going well. So I know you have something that you want to share with us today about bringing a little extra seasoning into the classroom.
Well, who doesn't love a little extra seasoning? I want to talk about spicing up your classroom lectures. Sarah, perhaps there is no form of instruction that is more associated with the teaching process and perhaps has inspired more controversy than the lecture. As more education experts are advocating that teachers limit direct lecturing in favor of student-centered learning, there are still plenty of experts out there who praise, or at least tolerate, the sage on the stage teaching format for its efficiency. But even those experts note that there are some forms of lecturing that are better than others. And in a recent article in EdWeek, education reporter Yuki Terada provides a review of the recent literature to discuss how teachers can spice up their classroom lectures and maximize their effectiveness. Among the advice that Terada provides is the importance of reviewing background knowledge with your students before the lectures begin. Studies show that even a simple review of key vocabulary or an introductory video before your lecture can help build interest in a topic amongst your students. Studies also show that chunking is a critical component of effective lecturing. With most elementary students being unable to focus on a lecture for more than 10 minutes, and that number isn't much higher for secondary school students, by the way, it is better to break up lectures into short chunks and have short breaks or student-centered learning activities in between. Finally, Terada notes that when lecturing to your students, slow down. From the article, quote, "Students will follow your lecture at different paces. Many will still be mulling information as you introduce a brand new concept, so avoid going too fast and build in pauses to let them catch up, ask questions, finish their notes, and process the material." How do you feel about lecturing, Dr. Phi? Are you just like completely in favor of student-centered activity, or do you still see some role for the sage on the stage?
Well, I mean, I don't think I'm a huge fan of lecturing in the way that is probably, our traditional infamous mental picture that comes to mind when you say lecture. But I am a fan of utilizing direct instruction and explicit instruction in a lot of different ways. And I don't know if it's just a prettier way to say it, but I am a fan of direct instruction when there's some very specific goals for it. So a lot of times we talk about when we're modeling things for students, we use the gradual release of responsibility, right? Which is I do, we do, you do. And the I do is the teacher, right? So that necessitates a little bit of direct instruction where the teacher is saying, everybody eyes on me. I'm going to do something. I'm going to model this for you. And then we are going to practice it together. And then you're going to practice it on your own. And I think there's a form of lecture that may be in there hidden, right? If we're using that term. But another thing that I liked from what you mentioned is the idea of building that background knowledge. In reading circles, we use the term front loading a lot, right? There's some things we need to front load in an activity before we start so that the students have a foundation upon which to build the knowledge that we're doing. If I'm using another really popular educational term, we talk about schema a lot, right? So students cannot just learn in this void. They're not this empty vessel that we throw knowledge into. There are foundations upon which we build that knowledge, and helping them to have a context for what we're talking about is that schema, that foundation upon which we can build more learning. A good example of this might be like if we're talking about the Dust Bowl in a history class or an English class, our students may not know what the Dust Bowl is, right? And so we want to front load some context for that. Just showing some slides with black and white pictures and, grapes of wrath type outfits and kids walking around without shoes and that old time kind of visual is enough to kind of cement their brain in saying, okay, this is the context, this is the time period, this is the way people looked, this is what's going on. And then when we start that conversation, they have that foundation upon which to build it.
Yeah. And I think a particular type of front loading that was talked about in this article that I didn't talk about in the initial story, but I think it's an interesting idea, is the role that pretests can play as a introductory aspect to the lecture. I mean, the article talks about two functions that a pretest serves. And by the way, you're not grading the students with this pretest, right? This isn't an
It's more of
assessment.
a survey.
Exactly. And that's one of the two functions that this is going to have. It's going to let you know as an instructor where your students are in terms of their initial understanding of the material, and you can use that to help contemplate what your instruction is going to look like. And then secondly, what it does for the student is it piques their interest in the subject matter. It identifies for the student their gaps in knowledge so that they know what to look for in the instructional process. And it's a nice way to sort of get the students integrated and introduced to the material. And if you combine that with some of these other front-loading activities, like a short video or some visual aids as you identified, it's a great activity to make the direct instruction more effective.
I'll tell you something that I utilized a lot in the classroom, and I was a big fan of pretests when it came to vocabulary instruction. And the way I would use it is I would actually give the students like a passage with the vocabulary words taken out, and the kids would just put their own word in there. And so they would either guess the word, right, that we were going to be discussing, or they would immediately have a synonym that they could kind of attach to. And so that foundation right there is helping them to build that bridge. And if they have no idea, they're like, I don't even know what word could fit here. That's a clue to them that, like, okay, hey, I really need to pay attention and take some extra time on this so that they could see what they're going to be learning and how they could be using that information.
What a great way to introduce students to vocabulary. It gets them thinking about the context clues right away. And frankly, who doesn't love Mad Libs? And I get some serious Mad Libs vibes from that. That's awesome.
It's that kind of idea, right? It was a brainchild of Mad Libs and Scattergories. I was just,
That's
throwing
right.
things in my brain, and I love anything that makes things a little bit more fun and interesting.
I'm also interested in the role that technology can play in our relationship with direct instruction. I can tell you, as I've become more of an online teacher in the past 2 years for epidemiological reasons, unfortunately, I have rethought what my direct instruction looks like. And in the old days, I used to stand up in front of the students and do these like little 10-minute chunk lectures. And then for the first couple of years of moving to online, that's what I was doing. I was up there in front of Zoom, in front of a bunch of black boxes that were my students, delivering direct instruction. And I thought, there's got to be a better way to do this. And with the access that is provided with virtual education and technology, I realized I can record these lectures. I can record little 6-7 minute lecture chunks, put some instructional student-centered activities in between, and allow the students to review this material and lecture on the and observe the lecture on their own time and do a little bit of flipped classroom type stuff. And I've enjoyed that.
Yeah, I think that can be really helpful. I'll be honest, when I was listening to you describe the resources in that article, one thing that kind of struck me as not really jiving with my understanding is that 10-minute attention span. If I'm being completely honest,
It's too high.
I thought that's pretty high. I don't know many kids or adults, if we're being completely honest, that have a 10-minute attention span to completely focus on that lecture. So I
That's
generally
probably right.
encourage,
Yeah.
yeah, I generally encourage teachers not to let that much time go by without doing some kind of check-in with their students to make sure that they're engaged with what you're talking about, and that really they're still with you, right? Even if it's a
Yeah.
thumbs down, a thumbs up, like a 1 to 5, where are we? How are you feeling? Just a quick check-in.
Yeah.
I
And
think before that 10-minute mark is really important.
the article does go on at length about the importance of utilizing checking for understanding, and it provides a
Yeah.
few helpful ways to do it. It even talked about the thumbs up method, thumbs down, or medium thumb thing that you
Right.
brought up. And, there's 1 to 5. There's a lot of classics in there. I encourage people to check out the article and learn more. But, I would say on my end, one of the things that I think is kind of a drag about direct instruction and lecturing is it doesn't get the students moving. But I
Right.
think you have a story that's all about getting students moving, and I'm excited to hear about it. Can you tell us a little bit about your story?
Yeah, a program that was developed in the state of Mississippi designed to help kids use their natural feel good hormones to make great strides in learning has really taken off. The Move to Learn program provides training for kids and their teachers to learn when to take brain breaks and get their bodies moving so they can learn. Here is Move to Learn coach Larry Calhoun talking about his work with students at Laurel Magnet School of the Arts in Laurel, Mississippi.
All the research and science shows that when children are happy, they're better learners. There's more learning going on when there's movement.
He says they call the movement taking a brain break.
And a brain break is nothing more than physical activity beside your desk in a classroom when the teacher notices that the students are not focused, not concentrating, and not spending time on task. And so it was developed as a teaching tool.
The kids said they had a lot of fun getting out of their chairs and moving their bodies.
Because we got to dance and move, run in place and do a lot of things.
Calhoun says the science shows activity makes kids happier. It has something to do with the natural chemicals in the brain.
There's some chemicals that they don't even know about, the dopamine, the endorphins, the oxytocin, those what they call feel-good chemicals that we all produce ourselves. So we say it's a way of getting high off our own supply through joy, through happiness, through peace, through just working together.
Calhoun says the program is used all over the state of Mississippi and even internationally.
It's also being used across the United States and worldwide. We got people in Okinawa, Japan that are using it. We got people in India that are using it. But it was designed for children right here in the state of Mississippi.
And schools can get involved with this program by going to their website, movetolearnms.org. We're going to link that in the description of the show. But this just puts a huge smile on my face. And I always say this, but I don't know that people will believe us after today that we don't coordinate our stories before the episode. But, a really important part of utilizing direct instruction or any instructional tools is knowing when your students need a moment to take a brain break. And those brain breaks can be as simple as just like take a 10-second dance party right next to your desk, get the wiggles out, get something, so that you can just get yourself back on track. And I love that this program is offering it not just to kids in Mississippi, but as Coach Calhoun mentioned, all over the world.
Yeah, Sarah, we're definitely going to get accused this week by the listeners of colluding on our stories. And I mean, here's how like bad it looks in terms of that evidence. The article that I brought in, the Ed Week article, literally uses the phrase brain break when talking about chunking lectures, saying, in between, after you do like 6-7 minute lecture chunks, allow your students to take a brain break where they can move around. So, I mean, definitely these two stories are feeding into each other. And it just really underscores the importance of having this kind of movement, this kind of just letting your body get loose and move around and let those endorphins produce as a necessary part of the learning process.
Well, I saw a lot of online instruction utilize this when we were, in the midst of lockdowns and quarantines, where online teachers would say, all right, everybody, I'm going to play this music and we're all going to get up and shake. And I think that it's something that I, at least, have noticed I need more and more since we've been stuck at home more and sitting more. I really struggle with that concentration, and that's part of why I was like, that 10 minutes just doesn't seem realistic to me. Because I'll be honest with myself, I know that my attention span has changed dramatically in the past few years, and I need to just get up and move around. I know at the beginning of the pandemic, I wonder if we even talked about this on the show, but I would set a timer for no more than like 45 minutes. And every 45 minutes, I would force myself to just step outside, walk around, just for a minute or so. It's kind of like how if you have an Apple Watch or a Fitbit, it'll remind you once an hour you need to get up, because it's so easy to just be droning on and on. And the truth is, we are not more effective when we do that. We are actually less effective. So it's really great to build that into our instruction where we're going to take these breaks, let the kids get that out. And we as adults need it too.
I'm glad that you brought up that point about adults using this, because the video that you brought up, it was elementary school kids doing the brain break.
Right.
And we certainly associate that kind of activity with the younger groups, right? Those are the ages where we are, even some states mandate things like recess for these groups.
Correct.
But what you're talking about, which is a very good point, is that we all need this. Secondary school students, grown adults, we all need this time to let our bodies, get loose and, move around, and not at the expense of allowing us to do our best work, but to help us do our best work. You have to take those breaks. You got to let your body move.
I was pretty notorious with the high school students that I worked with for getting them up and moving, especially during things like taking a test.
Mm.
And I would, encourage them to just go to the back of the room where they wouldn't be distracting anybody, or even stepping outside, doing some jumping jacks or some push-ups, just get the blood flowing, especially I think high schoolers, when we're in those longer testing environments, it is exhausting. And the number one thing that I would see is kids kind of drone, falling asleep a little bit, the head, the dip of the chin that told me, oh, we're about to lose them. And kids would always say, what's the big deal if I fall asleep? And I always said, let me ask you, if I went to your room 3 o'clock in the morning and woke you up, gave you a pencil and said, here, take your test, would that be your best work? Absolutely not, right? I would never want to do that to anybody. And I would not be happy if somebody tried to wake me up. So really getting the blood flowing, getting those endorphins, getting those feel-good hormones like oxytocin, as Coach Calhoun mentioned, they really make a big difference. And it sometimes just the silliness of your
Yeah.
teacher telling you, hey, go do 5 jumping jacks will be enough to just shake them into, I would get them saying things like, are you serious? Can I really go do that? And I would say, absolutely. What's going to help you? You want to do some shadow boxing? What's going to help you wake up? What's going to help you feel good about yourself right now? And then they'd kind of give me a face like, she's serious. Okay. And they'd go do it. And they'd come back with a big smile on their face. And they'd say, all right, I can do this. We're good.
Those brain breaks, they make you creative too. And I think it's important with your brain break, if you want to kind of maximize creativity with it, is to really make sure it's a break for your brain. Don't just scroll Twitter with it, because you want to give your brain like a chance to really, get into its own zone. People always say, man, I always get my best ideas in the shower.
Yeah.
You know why you get your best ideas in the shower? Because you're not listening to podcasts. You don't have your head in a phone, and you turn your brain off, but it's not really off, right? It's in a zone where it can be creative and be free and think. And to me, that's as important to, if not more important to, being a successful student and human being, as just always kind of working on the task at hand. You got to have both.
There's a phenomenon, which I'm going to forget what it's called, so I'm not going to try. But I've heard about this phenomenon where CEOs will have this like really intense problem. And so a lot of them have those little like putting greens in their office, and they'll just kind of step away from the conversation or on the phone, and they go to the putting green and they're just like tapping the ball and putting. And that physical act of like, okay, I'm going to clear my head and just focus on the ball and the putter in my hand, and I'm just going to focus on this very physical thing in front of me, actually will, open up the brain space. I know these are real technical terms I'm using here, but open up the
Works for me.
mentality, right? Where that part of your brain that was really hyper focused on problem solving kind of just processes in the background, and in the foreground you're focusing on that task in front of you, and that processing time is allowed to really help you develop better strategies, better solutions. And that's used by some of like the top CEOs on the planet. Of course it would work for our 7th graders,
Yeah, absolutely. I got a question to poll the listeners about. What are you doing in your classroom or even in your own life to take a brain break? What is your brain break of choice?
I've seen
Please.
some super creative ones on TikTok and on Instagram and Twitter. I mean, I would love to hear that as well, Ryan. It's a great way to wrap it up. Let's hear from you all. What are you doing for a brain break? Are you doing anything like the Move to Learn program in your school? Let us know. Reach out to us using the hashtag Big Ideas in Education. You can always reach us at Academica Media or at Ryan, Kair, myself at Read with Fye. We love talking with you about these things, and we'd love to hear what your opinions are, and we'll talk to you next time.
The views expressed on the preceding program have been those of the hosts and guests and do not necessarily reflect the views of Academica, its clients, staff, affiliates, or advertisers.